Good morning, beautiful people. How's everyone doing? I do something with kids when I do morning workshops or something like that. I'm going to say good morning once more to make sure everyone's awake. Good morning, beautiful people.
Good morning.
All right, this side's a little weak. Yet, good morning, beautiful people.
Good morning.
All right. Thank you so much to Cody, to Creative Mornings, to The Signal, especially to Plus Coffee, because I really needed it. I was actually chugging it as Cody was introducing me so I could make sure I have that I'm 100% present and that I can share this information with you. If you will, everyone should have like a piece of paper and a pencil at your seat. If you don't have one, raise your hand. I believe everyone should have one. Everyone good? Oh, I see a couple of hands in the back. So this morning, we're talking about the theme of lost, whether that might be actually being lost, or whether it may be the loss of something or someplace or someone. I wanted to speak with you in terms where we could explore these things in different ways, and I'm essentially just going to tell you a few stories. And as I'm telling you these stories are about that theme of lost and how creativity can be a means of finding our way. So what we're going to do is imagine ourselves with some tools that are creative tools that we can use when we're lost, and maybe identify sometimes in our own work, in our own lives, in our own histories and experiences where we've been able to navigate and create ways of direction, and we didn't even realize what we were doing at the time until having that 20/20 hindsight. Is that cool? That good?
Yes.
All right. So as Cody graciously introduced, I'm an artist, a writer, and also with the lawyer thing, I usually like to say I'm a recovering lawyer. And that is, I'm still very much a lawyer, but when you go to law school, they basically teach you to think a certain way. They say they're going to teach you how to think like a lawyer. And really what you're doing is just reading centuries of mansplaining that you're then expected to learn how to read. You know, you're basically taught how to be an expert mansplainer, basically, based on this idea of logic. But logic, you know, when you're lost, logic doesn't always lend itself to that situation. So let's go back about 10 years. I'm a law student at the University of Texas in Austin, Texas. And I'm miserable. I spent my years throughout college trying to decide whether I was going to go to law school or film school. And every day it was back and forth. The only thing that was for certain was that I was going to go in debt. That was basically like the only guarantee. And the things that drove me to law, however, were that understanding of the world that I thought that lawyers had. Being able to see the way society works, being able to articulate the issues, being able to speak to injustice, being able to envision what justice should look like. And this was inspired by people like Barbara Jordan, Thurgood Marshall, Charles Hamilton Houston, Pauli Murray, many other names that may escape you throughout school, but without whom we really wouldn't have the society at least functioning as well as it does today. And so I wanted to be able to understand the world the way Thurgood Marshall understood it. But my day-to-day life, I rather it look more like Tim Burton or Frida Kahlo or Jacob Lawrence. And so throughout college, I was like, what the hell am I going to do? Like, what does this look like to be able to understand the world one way and be able to express that understanding in another way? And I couldn't make a decision to be an artist at that time, at least the way I thought I needed to be an artist. So I went to law school like many other thousands of students and ambitious young minds across the world and across the country did. And I entered law school in 2008. And I remember sitting in the student lounge with the TV and one of the many anchors on CNN speaking about the recession, and going to my apartment and getting letters from law firms saying, unfortunately, we're not looking at hiring anyone at this time. And what they didn't include in the letters was that they were firing the associates they had. And so I'm at a point of about like 23 or 22, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, art was, art is my heart. I wanted to like try to explore film or painting. I decided to go to law, which, I have that understanding of the world, but also it felt like a prudent and safe thing to do. And then I could, establish a base to maybe fund some creative ventures in the future. And now Plan B isn't even working. And all the while I'm in these classes with these heavy textbooks in Austin, Texas, which is, if you haven't been there, it's a magnificent city, beautiful music venues, incredible energies, and I can't really enjoy any of that because I'm having to study. And at that point, I felt very much lost in purpose. What does it look like? What does it look like to actually know where I'm going? And what am I going to do with these ideas and with these passions? What does it look like to actually have like a specific path? I thought leading up to this experience that it would be the A, B, C, D, path. I'm going to stay forward in law school 3 years, then make a left, take this bar, continue on, then make a right for this job, and then I'll arrive at some destination. But at that point, sitting in that apartment in Austin, Texas, staring at a textbook with all the words blurring in together, looking like the same thing, the same issue over and over again, and having that feeling that everyone else knows what they're doing, or they're figuring it out, or they've been wanting to be lawyers since they were kids. But realizing that maybe I've been deceiving myself and not being forward about how do I pursue this passion. It didn't merely feel like I was looking at a fork in the road or multiple signs. It felt like I was just in complete darkness. What I'd like you to do at this point is take that piece of paper and take your pencil, and if someone were to give you a map to your purpose, what would the shape of that map look like? I'll ask that one more time. If you were to receive a map to your purpose, what would the shape of that map look like? And you can draw that as big or as small as you like. Don't overthink it. And take your time in drawing. I'm going to keep telling the story. So, I'm in Austin, frustrated, not sure what I'm doing, not sure where this is headed, not sure what my employment prospects look like, and not sure how, if I have the stamina or the energy to stay in school. And so what I do, and what I've done many times throughout my life, when I'm at a place where I feel stuck, is I just start drawing. I just start making marks. And I go to the local art store, buy a few supplies, buy a big 18 by 24 sketch pad, and I just decide to put off my homework for a day and just draw anything that comes to mind. And interestingly enough, several of the things that were coming to mind were people in suits with briefcases. Then it transitioned to people kind of taking off those suits, casting down those briefcases. Then it looked like certain symbols or items that were from the case books that I was reading. When I wanted to, when I was taking First Amendment law at the time. And so I would draw images of people trying to speak, but they may have been muzzled by certain garments or certain fabrics, or even things that may have looked like the flag. And I was illustrating the cases that I was studying while in law school. And so I could, that first time that I did that, I put the stuff aside. I felt myself breathing a little bit and went to bed, got up the next day, went to the class and started to see new possibilities for my life and for what I was doing and for where I was. After leaving that class, I came back home and I started sketching again. And this became a routine. Going to class, hearing the professors, reading the case law, studying the mansplaining, and then getting back to my materials and figuring out where the holes are in those opinions, where the holes are in those policies, where the holes were in the theories and the structures, but not in the form of white papers or reports or essays, but in sketches and paintings and stories that I could both figure out a way to narrate and illustrate. And so at this time, I'm starting to feel better about not knowing where I'm gonna be 2 or 3 or 5 years down the road, but where I was at that present time. And I knew I was at a place where, okay, I have an opportunity to make a direction and create this map from scratch. I have an opportunity to figure out not what the terrain is, but what the terrain can look like. And so creativity for me in that place of being lost in purpose was a way of sketching out what purpose can be, what potential we can have when we're able to take a moment amidst all of the confusion, amidst all of the silence, amidst all of the questions, and pause and just start making our marks like we're chiseling away in a cave. With the map that you've drawn, I'd like you to think about the symbol or the design that you created. What does it look like to imagine that map for your purpose as being something that you're able to create from scratch, where you're not given all of the answers, where you're not given the map legend, where you're not provided the time expectancy, there's no GPS, there's only you and that blank space. If you find another space on your paper, I'd like you to draw, everyone familiar with a compass? Has anyone ever used the compass? what, like, and you can say this out loud, what is that, what's the process like? What are some of the rules for using a compass?
Sit still.
Sit still. Ooh, I love that. What, of course the poet would say that. What else? We say that once more? Hold it level. What else? Say that once more. I love that.
Get your bearings, find where north is.
Find where north is.
Stay away from metal.
Stay away from, of course, absolutely. Stay away from metal.
Know where you need to go.
Know where you need to go. If you're just like playing with it and you don't really have a specific place in mind, that's critical. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is imagine a compass that helps you get to people. When we think about the technical use of a compass helps us get from one place to the other. But what does it look like to have a compass when you're navigating the crowd? When you're lost in a crowd of people? When you're lost in a crowd of personalities, of different identities, of different desires? What does it look like to know not only where to get to, but who to get to? If you will, take a few moments and sketch out a compass, and with that arrow, give yourself some creative and artistic liberty to design an arrow that will point you to the people that you belong with. This next story about being lost is about me trying to find my people. Some people like use that phrase, you know, trying to find your tribe. And we're going to fast forward from law school, which I survived, thankfully. And this is just a few years ago, probably like late 2014, 2015. I finished law school, took the bar, passed it. Now I'm working as a lawyer. And there were a lot of ups and downs in between that time, but one thing that was constant was that I was creating art. I was still working on this internal and external map of mine, trying to map out the places and map out the paths that weren't there before, and just sketch them out and figure them out as I go. With that process, I thankfully got into the position where I was able to work and pay some bills and be able to like do the day job and then make art in the evening. But obviously that wasn't, I felt alone. And I felt like I was lost in like a crowd of a bunch of work and a bunch of things that were happening that really didn't resonate with me. You ever see those movies and you get that shot of the individual at the cubicle or at their desk, and like everything is going on, but then it kind of focuses on them, and they clearly don't vibe with the space. They don't seem to belong there. Are you familiar with that scene? So if you will, like imagine me sitting at some desk, typing out some contract or reviewing some contract, and in my lower drawer I have a couple of sketchbooks on hand for emergency creative sessions, and day in, day out, it's just emails, it's just work, it's things that are of importance, but after work, I'm going home, I'm sketching, I'm coming back to work, I'm working with people, getting along, doing the thing, but I really didn't feel any sense of of community. And it feels like when you know there's a certain thing that, or when you're looking for a certain type of energy, or you're looking for a certain type of camaraderie, like it can be very obvious when you're not in that place, when you're not among those people, when you're not among those spirits. And what I was trying to figure out was, okay, like how do I find, what's the next step from having this map? How am I going to get to people that are also creating their own paths, or also creating their own ways, who know what it's like to be lost in the ways that I've been lost? And in the summer of 2014, my sister says, hey, let's get something to eat and after work, and after that we're going to go to this poetry session. And I was like, a poetry session? Like, what exactly, you know, do we need to write a poem? Do we need to be prepared? Do I need to make sure, like, I have something in advance? And she's like, no, it's like just something a friend invited me to. And so we're eating somewhere downtown, maybe on Market Street. And then we link up with my sister's friend. And then we go to this space on 800 Market Street, the Lovemans building. Everyone familiar with the Lovemans building? Does everyone know the history of the Lovemans building? Well, we'll come back to that. But essentially, it's a really historic building on Market Street. And when we're walking up to the building, I'm like, oh, this is literally right across the street from where I work. How long has this poetry session been going? And she's like, oh, like for a while, like maybe like a year or so. And we go up to the second floor, and the actual studio at the time that we entered was called Fancy Rhino. And we go into this special space they have, and there's this circle of these really beautiful, creative-looking individuals seated, and they're in this gathering. And we're talking with, we begin like, they're like just, you know, chilling, they're talking, they're just vibing, and all of a sudden someone comes in and it's like, okay, we're gonna listen to some music, and you're gonna write a poem imagining yourself as someone's shoes. And my first thought was probably like, what the hell? Like, what is this about? Like, and but it was both like bewilderment and excitement, because these are the questions, obviously, that I don't get in an email when trying to close a property. These are not the questions that come up when we're looking at like a sewer water system issue at work. And these were questions that I longed to hear, and from people and energies that I was missing. So we go through the poetry exercise, and we continue it. And at the end of this session, they open it up for people to share their own work. Some people share, some people are just listening, enjoying themselves. I ended up sharing a poem, and in reading it, you know, initially I was like, oh, I need to like make sure I'm on my game, and I need to perform and be 100% there and not get embarrassed or whatever. You know, you come into certain spaces with this misguided feeling of competition, because at the job that was the thing, competition. And you always got to be on. Someone's always trying to take advantage of you or advantage of the situation. And then being in this space where there are no competitive transactions. It's reciprocal and beautiful poetic exchanges. I felt like I had found something. I felt like I was finding something. And then after that, after the session ends, I meet the individual who's running it, and introduced myself. He's like, oh, it's good to meet you. I'm Genesis. And then I asked him, I'm like, how long, do you do this like all the time? He's like, yeah, man. And so I tell him I work like literally right across the street. And he gives me his number. He says, just come on through anytime. And then literally the next week, a following Friday, I'm walking down the street, not looking for anything in particular. I haven't been to the poetry session yet. And I hear my name, and it's Genesis on the deck with a camera, playing with a camera. He's like, yo, come up. And so that led to a friendship, sometimes playing hooky from work, because it was right across the street. So it's an easy reprieve. But what that led to was a way of developing an internal creative compass, of finding people that were helping me move in the direction that I wanted to move. After several months of going to these poetry sessions, one day I get the nerve to ask Genesis, hey, what would it look like if I could maybe help create a session or a poetry session that would include visual art? Because at this time he's starting to see my art, and he learns I'm a visual artist, and is encouraging it. And I asked him, would he ever be open to me for helping to facilitate, or, just dipping my toe in the water with helping to create a session that uses visual art as well as poetry. And then without hesitation, he replies, he was like, oh, that would be dope. But I mean, man, you could do your own thing if you want. If you create something and just give it a cool name, you can use this space on any of the 3 days. And so I take the weekend and I think back to my days in law school when I was sketching and when I was drawing. And there was this book that I came across called The Art Spirit by Robert Henry. And The Art Spirit is basically just a collection of talks and speeches and letters from Henry to his students and friends. And he's just talking about the love of making art. And he has these beautiful meditations, but he essentially is explaining how the visual art, the beautiful things we see, those are the byproducts. Those are as beautiful and as important as they are, they're the byproducts. The critical thing is being in the moment of creating. And how can you retain that? How can you be in that state of mind where anything is possible? And so Robert Henry also had this group of artists called the Eight. They only had one art show, but their legacy is built on creating art for the sake of life, as opposed to just creating art for art's sake. And they decided, instead of trying to follow the artists who were famous in Europe, who were painting wealthy patrons, they would paint everyday people. They would tell these stories. They would create these pictures. They would memorialize them. They would immortalize them. And so thinking back to that inspiration in law school that helped me get through and helped me make art and helped me make my map when I was feeling lost in purpose, and now finding people and trying to figure out a way to gather more of the energy and more of the people that inspired me by the work Genesis was doing, I thought of the idea of taking that group, the Eight, and the obvious fact that we were meeting in the Loveman's building on 800 Market Street, and created the 800 Collective, where we would gather artists and non-artists alike, regardless of your level of artistic skill. We would talk about issues in the community, issues in our neighborhoods, and make art based on those issues. Not in a grand scheme of trying to tell someone else's story, but starting with your own experience. How do you relate to inclusivity? That's as simple as a question of how many people do you get to cross that that have a different story or a different experience from you. And it doesn't take a beautiful portrait of these people. It can be a simple exercise. It could be a Venn diagram. And building on that, I've been blessed with finding my people, not only throughout Chattanooga, but in Houston, Texas, in New York, in Atlanta, in DC, all of these places where I've been able to do these workshops and do these sessions. And the idea is not that we're intent on finding a destination in these workshops, but that we're intent on maybe sharing a compass, maybe sharing our tools, maybe relating to how each other is lost or what we're looking for. At this point, if you'll revisit your compass, I'd like you to imagine a person that you're looking for with that compass. And you can write their name down, or if you don't know who they are, you can write a quality that they have. But what type of people do you want to be drawn to? What type of people do you want to follow? How can a compass be a tool for community? My last anecdote for you is it's not so much a story of my past or my process, but it takes place in the here and now, and it's something that I'm very passionate about and concerned about, and that I'm trying to learn to focus on in my work. And that's, we talked about, being lost in purpose, being lost in the crowd. Now, at this point, I think a lot about how we're not physically lost in a place, but how a place might be lost to us, how we may lose spaces, what happens when a place is lost. And by that I mean specifically to creatives and people that really beautifully center creativity in their lives. What does it look like when we're a community, or we're a people, or we're a city or a region without a true place? If you will, I'd like you to imagine what a North Star looks like, and what your North Star personally looks like. And you can draw that. It can be the simple 5-point, or it can be a little more complex. It can be you can literally illustrate, it can be a Van Gogh star, take your time. So what I mean by when a place is lost is when it's a certain way for a certain generation or a certain time. And then over time, things are supposed to grow. Things are supposed to mature. Things are supposed to evolve. But things aren't supposed to be lost. When a place starts to look different, not because it's being built upon, but because certain things are being taken away or destroyed or become absent for the space of new things or new stories, then are those new stories or new things really powerful? Do they really hold water? Will they really sustain us? When I was starting to learn more about what an artist's life looks like, and a couple of years into creating the 800 Collective, I was able to get some support and some grants to jump into the work full time, which has since then been a beautiful journey and roller coaster. I started to realize how we emphasize creativity in place, how much we we're trying to look to the arts and creativity and storytelling as a way to establish like community and a way to establish a sense of place and a way to establish even like a brand and an identity. And the more I saw that intention, the more I saw that work, the more I recognized the dangers of these places being erased as they're being drawn. When people have already created communities, when people have already created stories, when people already have experiences and they have wisdom, and that wisdom and those experiences and those stories aren't honored when there's development or when there are new ideas or when there are new policies that come into play, then a place becomes lost. And the place as we call it isn't really, it's not the full picture. And so with the work I began doing at the, in these past few years, I try to imagine how do we honor these places and what do we need to look to honor these places. And so, you know, in thinking of maps and then thinking of compasses, I get to thinking about just the sky in general and the stars. I'm gonna quote The Lion King. One of my favorite scenes is when Simba gets into trouble for going into the elephant graveyard. And then he and his dad are out in the field, and they play a little bit, and then Simba, of course, asks that question that introduces the theme of mortality to his dad. You know, we'll always be together, right? And then Mufasa, with the great James Earl Jones voice, you know, he's Simba. You know, look at the stars, and that scene stuck with me because, as I'm sure it stuck with a lot of people, because, you know, he references the great kings of the past, and they'll always look down on you, and whenever you feel alone, or I suppose whenever you feel lost, just remember they are there. And when I think of the stars, I don't think merely just of kings, but I think of our ancestors. I think of all the people whose bodies may be in the ground, but whose legacies, whose spirits, whose voices still have a place here. They still can provide directions just as maps can provide directions. They still can point you in directions, and they still can guide you just as a compass will guide you, or as your people and your friends will guide you. And even the idea of the stars representing our people and representing our legacies, I feel like it resonates strongly because stars create constellations. Constellations are mapped, and constellations have helped us navigate where to go for centuries. And when I think of our place, when I think of our city, when I think of our neighborhoods, and think of the things that we may be losing, whether there's physical spaces or whether there's stories, I try to imagine looking to those stars as you're creating these stars on your pieces of paper. What does it look like to imagine those as specific voices, not only of people you know, but maybe of people you don't know? Maybe people who have lived in the places or have walked the streets that we currently live in and walk. And what does it look like to excavate all the noise and find their stories, to center them in an inclusive storytelling platform, to recognize that at some point they were lost, and in their own ways they've helped make communities, they've helped make spaces, they've helped make directions. And as a whole, we can't get to the next place we can't be lost. We can't find where we're trying to go, or even enjoy the pleasure of being lost in the work that we want to do without first finding what's been done before, what's been honored before. In my work, I'm often thinking about, the famous writers that I admire, that I hope to emulate. Individuals like Lorraine Hansberry and James Baldwin, and musicians like Nina Simone, who are just brilliant, beautiful storytellers, and who also had convictions. And I think that in finding their inspiration, I've been very passionate about figuring out how to look at our community and how to ensure that we can not only see each other, but see each other's past and see each other's stories and experiences and legacies and where we're coming from, so that we can truly co-create a map that'll help us realize what Chattanooga can be and what it deserves to be. And I really appreciate your time. I'm so grateful that you've honored me with this opportunity to share space with you. And I guess I'll yield the floor to questions. Thank you so much.